Welcome the Lord's chosen. The scariest sound in a community is the echo of a truth they once laughed at. Think about it. Nothing rattles people more than watching the exact words they mocked, dismissed, or shrugged off unfold in real time, step by step, with receipts from reality itself. Psychologists call it cognitive dissonance. That mental short circuit when your brain refuses to believe what your eyes are seeing because it means admitting you were wrong. And let's be honest, nobody in the community wants to admit that the strange one, the black sheep, or the dreamer just read the future like an open book. See, chosen ones don't just say things. You drop time bombs in conversations. You speak truths that sound absurd, until one day the exact scenario comes crashing into the village square, leaving everyone clutching their heads like, wait, didn't they say this months ago? Suddenly the whispers stop. The laughter turns into nervous coughs, and the very people who called you crazy are now squinting at you like you've got Wi-Fi to the universe. And here's the irony. It's not magic, it's not luck, it's not even some wild coincidence. It's awareness. You saw the patterns they ignored. You read the silence between their words. You recognized the seeds of chaos before they sprouted into scandal, collapse, or betrayal. While they were distracted by the noise, you were tuned into the signal. Now the whole community's shook, not because the events happened, but because you said it would happen. And let's sprinkle in some humor here. It's almost like you've become that one relative at a family gathering who warns, don't touch that pot, it's hot. And everyone ignores them, until they're all standing in the kitchen with burned fingers, staring at you like you're the villain for being right. The suspense is thick, the tension is undeniable. And the funniest part? Their fear isn't about the past predictions. It's about wondering what you'll say next. Because if the last prophecy came true, what happens when the next one unfolds? Number one, they called you delusional, but now their reality is bowing to your foresight. They called you delusional, but now their reality is bowing to your foresight. That's the first and sharpest wound in this whole story. Because when you spoke, they didn't just disagree with you. They branded you as unstable, irrational, someone who couldn't separate dreams from facts. They mocked your clarity as madness, not realizing the madness was their own refusal to see what was standing in plain sight. It's always easier for people to call you crazy than to confront the cracks in the systems and people they've been worshipping. The word delusional wasn't about you. It was their shield. It was their way of protecting fragile egos from a reality they couldn't control. You spoke too sharply, too truthfully, and it scared them. It's not that they didn't understand. It's that they understood enough to know your words could dismantle the little lies they'd been living in. They couldn't handle that, so they buried you under ridicule. But ridicule doesn't erase truth. It only delays recognition. Now the delay is over. Reality has bent itself into the very shape of your words. Every detail you spoke is now standing tall in front of them like undeniable evidence. And the silence that follows is not peace, it's humiliation. The same mouths that laughed at you are now tight-lipped, not because they respect you, but because they can't find a way to spin the story without admitting you were right. Being called delusional was never about your mind, it was about their fear. There's a special kind of discomfort that comes when the one they called unstable becomes the compass pointing north while everyone else is spinning in circles. They have no defense left, no safe excuse, no easy way out. The only option left is to confront the fact that the delusional one wasn't sick. The community was. They needed you to be wrong, but truth doesn't bend to need. Truth bends reality itself. Now every step they take in this new, undeniable reality carries your fingerprints. And whether they admit it openly or not, the community knows the verdict. The one they rejected was the one who saw most clearly. And that's why they're shook. Because being wrong about you means they've been wrong about everything else too. Number two, the whispers they mocked have become the headlines they fear. The whispers they mocked have become the headlines they fear. That's the shift no one was prepared for. At first, your words were treated like background noise, something to laugh about, dismiss, or exaggerate into a joke. People whispered about you as if they were doing you a favor by entertaining your ideas for amusement. They thought you were stretching reality, blowing things out of proportion, or just talking for the sake of being heard. What they didn't realize was that your whispers weren't built on gossip or fantasy. They were rooted in clarity, observation, and foresight. The same conversations they once waved off are now the ones reshaping their entire lives. What they dismissed as harmless talk has grown teeth, and those teeth are biting down hard. It's one thing to roll your eyes at someone's predictions, it's another to wake up and see those very predictions unfolding with no escape. Now the whispers have turned into announcements, and those announcements are forcing them to face truths they ran from. What they joked about yesterday is the breaking news today, and they don't have the luxury of laughing anymore. The irony is sharp. The community that laughed at your nonsense is now scrambling to understand the very things you explained long ago. They're scared, not because events are happening, but because your voice is stamped on those events. Your name is quietly tied to the stories they never thought would come to pass. And now every time they hear news that aligns with your words, they feel a chill. It's not the situation that unnerves them, it's your accuracy. Fear spreads differently when it comes from a truth you once mocked. It carries shame, regret, and the weight of knowing you missed your chance to listen when it mattered most. They can't laugh now, because laughing would only expose how foolish they were to ignore you in the first place. And that's the punishment in itself. The whispers that were once dismissed as irrelevant chatter have returned as undeniable proof. The sting for them is realizing that ignoring you didn't make you wrong. It only delayed the impact. And now they're caught in the middle of living out the headlines that prove your voice carried more weight than they ever wanted to admit. That's why their fear is louder than their laughter ever was. Number 3, your warnings weren't curses. They were mirrors they refused to look into. Your warnings weren't curses. They were mirrors they refused to look into. That's the bitter truth people hate admitting. When you spoke, they acted like you were placing some dark spell over their lives, as if your words were the cause of the storm instead of the alarm before it hit. They confused caution with condemnation because it was easier to demonize you than to confront themselves. People don't like being reminded of the truth they're trying so hard to hide from, and that's exactly what your words did. They exposed the cracks they pretended weren't there. You weren't predicting their downfall for sport. You were pointing to the consequences written in their actions. Their choices, their patterns, their lies, their shortcuts. You saw where they would lead. But instead of pausing to reflect, they labeled your words as negativity, bitterness, or even hatred. They thought you were wishing them harm, when in reality you were handing them a lifeline. They chose to spit on the warning rather than use it to change direction. And now, the same outcomes you spoke of are staring them in the face, not because you cursed them, but because they cursed themselves by ignoring the truth. What unsettles them most is how clear your words feel in hindsight. The details line up too perfectly for it to be coincidence. The decisions they shrugged off, the alliances they formed, the paths they walked, you traced them before they even arrived at the destination. That's what burns. They can't accuse you of bringing this on them anymore. The mirror you held up is now the very reality they're drowning in. The guilt and fear they carry now come from knowing you didn't want this for them, but you saw it for them. That's the difference they never understood. Warnings don't create disasters. Ignoring them does. And now, with everything unfolding, they're forced to admit that the curses they accused you of speaking were actually the reflections of their own self-made chaos. Your words didn't doom them. Their refusal to listen did, and that's the hardest truth for them to swallow, that you weren't their enemy, but the mirror they couldn't bear to face. Now that mirror is cracked wide open, and they're trapped inside the reflection of what they refuse to accept. Number 4, they wanted your voice silenced because it exposed the expiration date on their illusions. They wanted your voice silenced because it exposed the expiration date on their illusions. That was the real threat, not you, but the way your words stripped away the comfort of lies they had built their world on. People like stability, even when it's false. They'll cling to the illusion of peace, the illusion of control, the illusion of moral superiority, because it keeps them from facing the fragile reality underneath. Your voice didn't just challenge them. It revealed that everything they were leaning on had an expiry date stamped across it in bold letters. They mistook your honesty for hostility, but the truth is you weren't out to ruin anything. You were simply pointing out what couldn't last. And that's what frightened them most. Because deep down they knew you were right. They knew the friendships weren't genuine. The alliances were built on shaky deals, and the image they presented to the world was carefully painted over cracks. They weren't afraid of losing peace. They were afraid of losing the performance. That's why they worked so hard to silence you. If they could discredit you, laugh at you, or paint you as dangerous, then they could delay the inevitable. They could keep their audience applauding while the stage itself was rotting beneath them. But truth has no respect for illusions, and it has no patience for denial. Once it's spoken, it begins to unravel the fabric of deception, thread by thread, until everyone can see what was always there. You didn't ruin their peace. You revealed it was fake from the beginning. The so-called peace they defended so fiercely was nothing more than avoidance dressed up as harmony. It was people pretending, ignoring the obvious, and holding their breath so the cracks wouldn't echo. That's not peace, that's performance. And your voice shattered it, not because you wanted destruction, but because destruction was already built into the foundation. Now the show has ended, and the audience is seeing the truth they tried to hide. Their silence about you isn't victory, it's fear. Because once an illusion collapses, it can never be rebuilt with the same power again. And they know it was your voice that made sure of that. Number 5, the shock isn't about what happened, it's about you being right when they swore you were wrong. The shock isn't about what happened, it's about you being right when they swore you were wrong. That's the part that cuts the deepest. It's not the event itself that has them restless at night. It's the fact that your voice rings in their heads every time they replay the outcome. They can deal with a problem, they can deal with a crisis, but they can't deal with being forced to admit that the person they dismissed, laughed at, or even slandered was the one who saw it coming before anyone else. That humiliation weighs more than the truth itself. For them, it was never just disagreement. It was arrogance. They needed you to be wrong because your accuracy would mean their entire system of judgment was flawed. Their positions, their titles, their reputations, their confidence in themselves, all of it would lose credibility if the one they undermined turned out to be the voice of truth. So, they bet everything on your failure. They mocked you loudly and in public, thinking that if enough people agreed, it would make you wrong by default. But reality doesn't bend for anyone's ego. It unfolded exactly as you said, with precision they can't ignore. Now, the pride they clung to so tightly is strangling them. To admit you were right is to admit they were blind. To acknowledge your foresight is to confess they had none. Their pride is choking harder than the truth itself, because the truth is external, but pride eats you alive from the inside. It doesn't just sting, it corrodes. This is why they avoid you, why their words stumble when your name comes up, why they'd rather twist themselves into knots than simply say, "You were right." That sentence feels heavier to them than carrying the problem itself. The irony is cruel. They'd rather suffer the reality they denied than acknowledge the person who tried to prepare them for it. That's why the community is so shaken, not just because of what happened, but because the person they swore was wrong is now standing on the right side of history. And whether they like it or not, every outcome they face is a reminder that your truth, cut deeper than their pride could ever protect them from. Number 6, your accuracy shredded the myth of their control. Your accuracy shredded the myth of their control. For the longest time, they walked around as if they were untouchable, as if every decision and every outcome was theirs to dictate. They wore the mask of authority so well that most people believed it. They moved with confidence, spoke with certainty, and carried themselves like they were the architects of everyone else's fate. But the one thing they didn't calculate for was truth, and truth doesn't answer to performance. The precision of your words, the way events lined up exactly as you said, tore through the illusion they worked so hard to maintain. Every event unfolding proves they were never the authority. They just performed the role until you cracked it open. Authority is not about costumes, titles, or the volume of your voice. It's about alignment with reality. They never had that. They were simply acting, making decisions, and hoping no one noticed how fragile their so-called control really was. But your accuracy exposed it all. The predictions you made didn't just come true. They came true in ways that stripped away the last excuse they could hide behind. Now people see it. The ones who once bowed to them in fear are beginning to question how much of their power was real and how much of it was a show. This is why they fought so hard to silence you, to discredit you, to label you as unstable or irrelevant. Because deep down they knew if your words ever proved themselves, the curtain would fall, and that's exactly what has happened. Now, with each event, it becomes clearer that they were never in charge of anything. They didn't command reality. They tried to manipulate perception, and perception always collapses when truth arrives. The sting for them is knowing that their influence was borrowed, not earned. They relied on fear, confusion, and appearances, but your clarity cut through all of it. You showed that their authority was temporary, conditional, and fragile. Nothing more than a role in a play that could only run as long as the audience stayed blind. Now the audience is awake, and the actors are scrambling. Their myth of control has been shattered, and your accuracy is the hammer that broke it. Number 7. The community isn't just shook, it's split. The community isn't just shook, it's split. The division is sharp and it cuts deeper than most people want to admit. On one side, you have those who are humbled. They've seen enough to understand that your voice carried weight, and whether they liked you or not, they can't deny the precision of what you spoke. These are the people who replay your words in their minds and realize that they should have listened instead of brushed you off. For them, the shock has turned into a quiet respect, even if their pride won't let them say it out loud. They may not praise you publicly, but in their hearts they know you were right. On the other side are the ones who are humiliated. These are the loudest skeptics, the ones who laughed the hardest, mocked the longest, and felt the safest in their disbelief. They didn't just doubt you. They built their confidence on the assumption that you would be proven wrong. And now, with everything unfolding exactly as you said, their laughter has turned against them. What once made them feel superior now makes them look small. Their humiliation burns, not because of what happened, but because they realize their denial made them the fools in the story. This split is what makes the whole community feel unstable. It's no longer about the events themselves, it's about the lines being drawn. Some are leaning closer to you, trying to understand how you saw so clearly. Others are pulling away, hoping distance will protect them from the shame of ever admitting you were right. The tension between the humbled and the humiliated is what keeps the air heavy. Conversations change when your name comes up. Some speak carefully, others aggressively, but no one is neutral anymore. The truth has a way of dividing people, and that's exactly what has happened here. The community isn't united in shock. It's fractured by the weight of your accuracy. For half, it's a lesson. For the other half, it's a wound. And the irony is that both groups prove the same point. Your words didn't just predict events, they exposed character. They revealed who could humble themselves enough to learn, and who would rather choke on pride than face the truth. Number 8. Their laughter has aged like spoiled wine. Their laughter has aged like spoiled wine. What once seemed fresh and entertaining has turned sour, bitter, and embarrassing with time. In the beginning, their jokes about you carried a kind of confidence, a shared mockery that made them feel secure in dismissing you. They laughed loudly, boldly, as though their amusement was proof that you were wrong. But laughter has a strange way of shifting when the truth starts showing up. What once was humor is now the very thing that exposes their blindness. The sound of their own voices echoing in memory has become unbearable. The same jokes they made about you are now the bitter taste they can't spit out. They can't escape them because those jokes weren't just words. They were public declarations of certainty. They mocked your insight. They turned your warnings into punchlines. And they wore their mockery like a badge of pride. But every outcome that matched your words has turned those punchlines into chains. They're trapped by their own laughter. They can't rewrite what they said. They can't erase the moments they chose to mock. And now, those same moments hang over them like reminders of their arrogance. What stings them most is not that you were right, but that they went out of their way to make you look foolish. They didn't simply disagree, they entertained themselves at your expense. That entertainment has aged badly because with each passing event it looks less like humor and more like evidence of their own blindness. The jokes haven't just spoiled, they've fermented into shame. And shame is far heavier to carry than being proven wrong. Now when the thought of you comes up, laughter is no longer an option. Their mouths tighten, their eyes shift, and the room grows heavy because the memory of their own words tastes rotten. The jokes are still there, but they're no longer funny. They're haunting. They've become proof that arrogance doesn't age well. That's the justice of truth. It doesn't just correct the lie, it rots the laughter that defended it. And the very people who thought mocking you gave them power are now choking on the bitterness of their own spoiled humor. Number 9, you didn't just predict events, you exposed patterns. You didn't just predict events, you exposed patterns. That's what unsettles them the most. A single event can be brushed off as coincidence, luck, or chance. People can convince themselves that you got lucky once, that you made a wild guess that happened to land. But patterns are different. Patterns show consistency, design, and inevitability. When your words started lining up with not just one outcome but several, it stripped away the safety of coincidence. They had to face the fact that you weren't guessing at all. You were reading the blueprint of their behavior, the rhythm of their choices, and the destination of their path. They're only realizing now that you were never talking about one moment, but the entire cycle they're trapped in. While they were focused on single situations, you were pointing to the machinery behind those situations. You weren't just telling them what would happen tomorrow. You were describing the way tomorrow would keep repeating until something changed. That's what makes your accuracy so frightening. It's not about an isolated event. It's about exposing the system that keeps producing the same results. This realization is heavy for them because it means your voice isn't tied to random chance. It's tied to truth. And truth doesn't just expire after being proven once. Truth keeps surfacing over and over until it's undeniable. They can't run from it because no matter where they turn, the same cycle plays out, just like you said it would. It's as though your words weren't predictions but diagnoses, identifying the disease at the root rather than the symptoms on the surface. What makes it worse for them is knowing you saw this long before they did. They thought you were exaggerating, stretching things out of proportion, or speaking in riddles. But the riddles are making sense now, and the cycle is visible to everyone. Their denial is cracked under the weight of repetition. Each new event feels like déjà vu, but it's not déjà vu. It's the confirmation of your clarity. And that's the most humbling part. Realizing you weren't talking about one thing at all. You were pointing out a loop they were too blind to see. And now that loop is closing in on them, proving you weren't just right once. You were right about the entire system they've been living in. Number 10, the fear isn't in what happened, it's in what you'll say next. The fear isn't in what happened, it's in what you'll say next. That's the shadow hanging over them now. The events that unfolded were already enough to shake them, but what unsettles them even more is the thought of what comes after. If your last words matched reality so perfectly, then what guarantee do they have that your next words won't carry the same weight? That uncertainty is what keeps them restless, watching you closely, almost flinching at every syllable that comes from your mouth. They know if the last word came true, the next one will too, and that terrifies them more than the present. Living through a difficult event is one thing. Living with the awareness that someone else can read the pattern of your life is another. It strips away their illusion of control. They can't comfort themselves with denial anymore because denial has already failed them once. Now, every time you speak, their pride and fear collide. Pride wants to dismiss you again, but fear whispers, what if they're right again? That tension eats at them more than the situation itself. What you carry isn't just accuracy, it's anticipation. Your words linger in the air longer than anyone else's because no one can simply dismiss them anymore. They weigh heavy because they might very well be previews of the future. And that's what truly frightens them. Not what already happened, but the possibility that their next downfall, betrayal, or collapse is already sitting on your tongue, waiting to be spoken. This is why they tiptoe around you now. They don't just fear your presence, they fear your insight. They'd rather not ask you questions because the answers might be too sharp, too real, too close to what they already sense but don't want confirmed. They know your accuracy isn't random, and that truth unsettles them more than the pain of the present. Pain fades, but the fear of what's coming next lingers like a constant storm cloud. Their unease is proof of your power. The past didn't silence you. It validated you, and that validation has made your voice impossible to ignore. Now every word you speak feels like prophecy, and every pause feels like a warning they can't afford to overlook. That's why their fear isn't about yesterday, it's about tomorrow and the fact that you've already seen it. Number 11, your truth dismantled their comfort zones. Your truth dismantled their comfort zones. That's why their reaction to you was never just resistance. It was defense. They had built entire lives around things that weren't solid, but they convinced themselves those things were unshakable. They built identities, relationships, reputations, and even belief systems on shaky ground, and as long as no one pointed it out, they could pretend it was stable. But your truth refused to let them stay comfortable in that illusion. It stripped away the padding, the excuses, and the stories they told themselves, until all that was left were the cracks they had been ignoring. What they considered stable was actually built on denial, and your words forced the cracks to show. Denial is powerful because it feels safe. It allows people to avoid looking too closely at the things that scare them. But denial is also fragile. It only takes one sharp truth to pierce it, and when you spoke, that's exactly what happened. Your words hit where it hurt most, not because you intended to wound, but because you exposed what was already broken. You weren't breaking their world, you were revealing that it was already broken. This is why they reacted so violently to you. It wasn't that you lied or exaggerated, it was that you took away their comfort blanket. People will protect their illusions more fiercely than their truths, because illusions are easier to live with. They didn't want to see the cracks, because to admit they were there meant admitting everything they leaned on could collapse, and collapse is exactly what they feared. Now they're stuck facing a reality they can't unsee. Once truth exposes a crack, denial no longer works the same. They can't go back to pretending no matter how hard they try. The illusion is spoiled, and the comfort they once had has turned into constant unease. They may hate you for it, but deep down they know your words didn't destroy their stability. They just revealed it was never stable in the first place. That's the real power of your truth. It doesn't just speak to the surface. It dismantles the false structures people cling to. And when the dust settles, they're left with no choice but to admit that what they thought was peace was really just fear covered in silence. You didn't create the cracks. You just made them impossible to ignore. Number 12. You didn't gain validation, you gained leverage. You didn't gain validation, you gained leverage. Validation would mean you were waiting for them to approve you, waiting for them to clap, waiting for them to finally nod and admit you were right, but you never needed their applause. What happened when your words came true wasn't about acceptance, it was about a shift in power. Every sneer, every dismissal, every accusation that you were wrong has now backfired. Their disbelief, the very thing they used as a weapon against you, has turned into the evidence that proves how far ahead you were all along. That's the difference between validation and leverage. Validation belongs to them, leverage belongs to you. Validation means they still hold the authority to define your worth. But leverage means the weight has shifted and they now stand exposed under the light of your accuracy. They can't erase what they said about you, they can't undo how confidently they denied you, and they can't escape the fact that their disbelief is now the receipt of your foresight. Every word they used to discredit you has become the testimony that you saw what they could not. This is why the atmosphere around you has changed. It's not just that people are shocked, it's that they're cautious now. They've realized your voice isn't just noise to ignore, it's a force they have to reckon with. Some approach you with respect, others with quiet resentment, but either way, the balance has shifted. You hold a kind of power that can't be faked, the power of being right in a world that swore you were wrong, and that leverage is heavier than validation ever could be. Their disbelief used to weigh against you. Now it's the proof that you were always 10 steps ahead. That's the irony that haunts them. The very thing they used to mock you is now the measure of your clarity. The more they denied, the more your accuracy shines. You didn't just predict events. You exposed how blind they were. And now, every time they think back on how hard they fought to dismiss you, it only deepens the truth that you were always walking ahead of them, already knowing where the road would lead. That's why you don't need their validation. You already own the leverage and they can't take it back. Number 13. The shock is the sound of masks breaking. The shock is the sound of masks breaking. For so long, people in that community wore faces that didn't match their true selves. They smiled, they pretended, they played loyal while secretly plotting something else. And everyone bought into it, except you. You saw through the performance long before anyone else even suspected. Your foresight wasn't just about events. It was about character. You picked up on the cracks in people's words, the inconsistencies in their actions, and the hidden motives that were disguised as kindness. You spoke it and they laughed at you. But now the masks are falling. And the shock isn't just in the exposure, it's in realizing you were right the entire time. People they trusted are being exposed, and it's your foresight that pulled the curtain. That's the part they can't digest. It would have been easier if life had revealed the truth on its own. But the fact that you named it beforehand is what makes it sting. The unmasking was inevitable, but your words lit the fuse, and now no one can unhear what you said. Every revelation echoes back to your voice, reminding them that you called it before the act collapsed. This is why the community feels divided and unsettled. It's not just betrayal that hurts, it's embarrassment. How could they have trusted people who were so obviously false once the truth was revealed? How could they laugh at you when you were only trying to prepare them? The exposure cuts two ways. It proves you right and it proves them wrong for ignoring you. And that double blow is heavier than the betrayal itself. The beauty and the discomfort of truth is that it doesn't just unmask others, it unmasks the people who chose to believe in lies. Your foresight has made everyone confront not just the hidden faces of others, but their own blindness. That's the real shock. It's not just about false friends or broken trust. It's about the realization that you had the clarity they lacked, and they can never erase that fact. The curtain has been pulled, the masks have shattered, and the performance is over. And the silence that follows isn't peace. It's the weight of truth they can no longer cover up. Number 14. You didn't just predict, you prepared. You didn't just predict, you prepared. That's the part that sets you apart from them. It's one thing to see what's coming, it's another to adjust your steps long before the storm arrives. While they laughed, doubted, or dismissed your words, you were already making moves behind the scenes. You weren't waiting for validation, you weren't arguing to prove a point. You were quietly preparing yourself for the very reality they swore would never come. Now, as everything unfolds, the difference is clear. They're scrambling, trying to catch up while you're standing steady because you built yourself for this moment long ago. That's the quiet power of foresight. It doesn't just give you the ability to call things out. It gives you time to adapt before others even see the shift. You learned to pack your strength while they mocked. You positioned yourself differently while they wasted energy denying. You chose foresight over comfort, and now you're living in the benefits of that choice. They thought ignoring the signs would save them from change. But ignoring doesn't stop reality, it only delays it, and delay is what has them panicking now. While they're dealing with the shock of being unprepared, you're calm because nothing here surprises you. You counted the cost already, you felt the weight of it before it landed. That's why their chaos doesn't shake you. You've already lived through it in your preparation. You let go of certain people, built new habits, guarded your peace and set your foundation while they were still laughing. And now those decisions are paying off in ways they can't ignore. It's not arrogance that keeps you steady, it's preparation. You're not calm because life is easy, you're calm because you made hard choices when everyone else was distracted. That's what they can't stand, the proof that you weren't just talking, you were acting, aligning and building while they stayed blind. And now, the evidence is undeniable. They scramble in panic, but you don't have to. Because prediction was never the end goal. You didn't just speak about what was coming, you adjusted for it. And that's why in the middle of their storm, you're the one standing firm. Not lucky, not untouched, but prepared. They called you delusional, mocked your whispers, dismissed your warnings, and tried to bury your voice under laughter and pride. But every crack you pointed out has widened, every mask you exposed has fallen, every cycle you named has repeated, and every word you spoke has found its proof in reality. The community isn't just shocked. It's divided between those who are humbled by your clarity and those humiliated by their denial. What they thought was control has collapsed into performance, and what they called peace has revealed itself as fragile denial. Your accuracy hasn't just proven you right, it has shifted the balance of power. Their disbelief no longer weighs against you, it testifies for you. Their jokes no longer weaken you, they haunt them. And their fear is no longer about the past events, but about what you might say next. Because you didn't just predict, you prepared. You stood steady while they scrambled. You adapted while they denied. And now, in the chaos of their panic, your calm is its own prophecy. This is the truth they can't escape. Your voice was never the enemy. It was the mirror. And the reason they wanted it silenced was because it showed them an expiration date on illusions they weren't ready to give up. But truth doesn't die when it's mocked, and foresight doesn't fade when it's doubted. In the end, it's not their laughter that will be remembered, it's your clarity. So let them wrestle with the shock. Let them choke on pride. Let them stumble in the panic of unpreparedness. You've already walked past it, because your story isn't about being proven right once. It's about being steps ahead in a world that pretended you weren't. And now the curtain has fallen, the masks are gone, and the truth stands where denial once lived. The community's shook. But you're steady. Because when the noise fades, reality will always bow to foresight. And you carry that foresight within you. And if this message hit you deep, if it opened your eyes or reminded you of the power of foresight and truth, then don't just leave it here. Carry it forward. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss these revelations. Hit that like button if you felt the weight of these words. Drop your thoughts in the comments because your voice matters here. And share this with someone who needs to hear it right now. This isn't just content, it's confirmation. And every time you support this message, you help keep the truth alive and unshaken. So subscribe, like, comment, and share. And together we'll keep pulling back the curtain where illusions fall and truth always stands tall. Stay blessed always.